I say bend because of the words that the prophet said. He created a picture or a metaphor that he used when he was describing God's blessing on this people. He said, "They are like cedars beside the waters." You may know this, but trees that are near water, like plants near a window, will change their direction, change the direction in order to accommodate their need for nutrition, especially in an arid area like they were in that day and in that place. If they're in a darker place and they sense sunlight is coming from a certain direction, they are going to bend themselves as much as they possibly can over time in order to get within grasp of that light. If they're in a parched area, they will shoot their roots farther down into the earth and the soil, into the lower layers, until they either find water or die trying. And if they're in a dry climate like Israel and Moab were, but they're growing near a stream or a river, they are going to bend themselves and direct their roots toward that water in order to tap it. In other words, they are willing. It is built into their DNA to be willing to change, drastically if necessary, in order to survive, in order to thrive. The Torrey Pines of Southern California, they exist in a place called La Jolla, which is kind of like a suburb, a northern suburb of the city of San Diego. There are only two places in the world that the Torrey Pines exist. La Jolla is one, and a small island off of the nation of Brazil is the other. Those are the only places where they're indigenous. These trees are so sensitive to climate and to their surrounding environment, and so incredibly adaptable to it, that they bend and they twist toward any shift of sunlight or moisture over the time that they grow, over the years and the decades that they are growing. And as they grow, consequently, they become very contorted. It's almost like an agrarian version of an acrobatic contortionist. These trees twist and they turn. Sometimes they are going south. They are growing down, not up. And then the next moment that change their direction, they're curving up again. They're amazing to look at. The severe adaptability of these trees fosters in them such an extreme uniqueness. It's a fascinating beauty to look at, to such an extent that they are sought out by tourists all over the world. They come just to see the Torrey Pines. Their beauty and their rareness are a direct result of their malleability, of their adaptability, of their instinct to change and redirect their energies to wherever their source of life is coming from. Changes like that. I think most of the changes in our lives come from God. They're a natural part of the process of life, but God is fully aware that they are happening. And I would dare say that most of the change in my life, in reflection, had some type of purpose in my own growth. Change is not a source, it's not meant to be a source of vexation, but something that is offered to us to enable us to branch out into new expressions of ourselves, to who we are in God, and to find new life in the process. We know that God welcomes us exactly as we are. He loves us that much. We teach that in this church. We teach that in our denomination. come as you are, we understand that we love and serve and worship a God like that. But God also loves us enough to not allow us to remain who we are or in the state that we find him, but presents things in our lives that serve to stretch us, that serve to cause us to grow, and things that carry the opportunity to transform us into who we can be. Not just leave us who we are, transform us who we can be into all that God intends us to be. That's the purpose of change and the pain that often accompanies it. In closing, just a couple scriptures that I think really underscore this. The writer of Hebrews in chapter 12 says this, that who the Lord loves, he disciplines. Endure hardship as discipline, the writer says, for God is treating you as his sons and daughters. For what child is not disciplined by his father? If you are not, then you are illegitimate children and not true heirs of the promise. Moreover, we have all had human parents who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of our spirits and live? Our fathers disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful, but later on produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who submit themselves to be trained by it. Now, if you replace the word discipline in that scripture with the word change, which I think is a very fair exchange to make because they are very similar, both in purpose and in outcome, I believe that in that word we have a promise from God that God will actively work through the circumstances of our lives, the ones that we think are vexing, to produce godliness in us, to produce holiness in us, to make us more look like him. There's another promise by the prophet Jeremiah in the book of Lamentations. In the 3rd chapter, he says this, I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. For though he brings grief, he will also show compassion. So great is his unfailing love. For he does not willingly bring affliction or grief to the children of men. The call, the challenge to bend is for our benefit. It's to learn to bend like the Torrey Pines. That comes from God, who also extends then grace upon grace to endure those changes and to become the better for them, to work through and adapt to those shifts, whether those are expected or unexpected, which will inevitably influence our lives. And more often than not, God is their author. God is the instigator of those changes and brings with them the hope of transformation into something more beautiful, something even more unique, whose specialness blooms and is obvious to the world. And the promise to hold us firmly, to hold us steadily, while we go through that.